But what happened next would turn a small British sitcom into one of the biggest television stories ever told. In the early 1970s, British television was filled with familiar comedies. Many followed the same ideas, the same characters, and the same safe jokes. Then, two creative minds wanted to do something completely different. One of them was John Cleese, already famous for his work with Monty Python. The other was his then-wife, Connie Booth, a talented writer and actress. Together, they created a comedy based on a real hotel owner Cleese had once met while staying with the Monty Python team. The man was rude, impatient, and seemed to treat his guests as if they were a burden instead of customers. That strange experience became the inspiration for Basil Fawlty, the nervous, angry, and often foolish owner of the fictional Fawlty Towers Hotel. From the very first episode in 1975, viewers saw something different. Basil was not a hero. He lied, panicked, shouted, and made one terrible decision after another. Every attempt to fix a problem only created an even bigger disaster. The comedy came from watching everything fall apart in the most unexpected ways. At the center of the chaos were unforgettable characters. Sybil Fawlty kept the hotel running while trying to control her husband. Manuel, the confused waiter from Spain, often misunderstood Basil's orders, leading to hilarious misunderstandings. Polly, played by Connie Booth, quietly solved problems that everyone else created. The show's sharp writing, perfect timing, and unforgettable performances quickly earned praise from critics and audiences alike. Even though only 12 episodes were ever produced, Fawlty Towers began building a reputation as one of the smartest sitcoms Britain had ever seen. What do you think makes a comedy truly timeless? Great writing, unforgettable characters, or fearless humor? Share your thoughts in the comments below. But as the show's popularity grew, so did its willingness to push boundaries. The writers believed comedy should make people uncomfortable before making them laugh. That bold approach would soon lead to a moment no one expected. One episode contained a scene that many viewers laughed at when it first aired. Others were shocked. Years later, that same scene would return to headlines, spark fierce arguments around the world, and even raise questions about whether one of television's greatest sitcoms should still be shown. The biggest controversy in Fawlty Towers was still waiting, and it nearly changed the show's legacy forever. But the moment that would define Fawlty Towers for decades did not happen when the episode first aired. It exploded years later, in a completely different world. When the episode, The Germans, first aired in October 1975, it quickly became one of the show's most memorable stories. Basil Fawlty had just suffered a concussion. Despite being told to rest, he insisted on running the hotel while a group of German guests checked in. As Basil's condition grew worse, so did his behavior. He made awkward comments, struggled to stay calm, and desperately tried not to mention the Second World War. The harder he tried, the more everything fell apart. Then came the scene that millions would remember. Unable to control himself, Basil suddenly began goose-stepping through the dining room and shouting, "Don't mention the war!" Ironically, he was the one who could not stop talking about it. The joke was built on Basil's own foolishness. He was not presented as someone to admire. He was the punchline. At the time, many viewers saw the scene exactly that way. Critics praised John Cleese's performance, and the episode became one of the most quoted moments in British comedy. For years, "Don't Mention the War" became part of popular culture. But hidden inside the same episode was another moment that would later attract far more attention. An elderly guest known as Major Gowan used several racist terms while speaking casually about people from different backgrounds. Even in the 1970s, the comments were meant to show that the Major was old-fashioned and out of touch. None of the other main characters celebrated his views. In fact, the writing presented his language as part of his flawed personality. For decades, the episode remained available without attracting major controversy. Then society changed. Conversations about race, representation, and harmful language became much more serious. Television companies began reviewing older programs through modern standards. In 2020, during a wider examination of classic television shows, the episode was temporarily removed from a streaming platform because of the Major's language. The decision immediately made international headlines. Many people supported the removal, arguing that offensive words could still cause harm regardless of the story's intention. Others believed the episode was being misunderstood because the racist remarks were spoken by a character the audience was not supposed to respect. Suddenly, a sitcom that had ended more than 40 years earlier was at the center of one of the biggest debates about comedy, censorship, and history. If you enjoy uncovering the hidden stories behind television's most unforgettable moments, subscribe. Some of the greatest classics have histories far more dramatic than what ever appeared on screen. But the temporary removal was only the beginning. The public reaction became even louder, drawing in journalists, historians, comedians, and John Cleese himself. What happened next would decide whether Fawlty Towers would remain a beloved classic or become a symbol of a changing cultural debate. But as the debate grew louder, it stopped being just about one sitcom. It became a much bigger question. Should classic television be judged by today's standards or by the time in which it was created? When the episode disappeared from streaming in 2020, the reaction was immediate. Newspapers, television programs, and social media filled with arguments from both sides. What had once been remembered as one of Britain's funniest comedies was suddenly at the center of a global cultural debate. The streaming service explained that the episode had been removed because of the racist language spoken by Major Gowan. According to reports, the company wanted time to review whether the content should remain available in its original form. That decision surprised many fans. Some believed removing the episode was the right choice. They argued that certain words, even when spoken by a fictional character, could still hurt viewers today. They felt broadcasters had a responsibility to think about modern audiences, especially younger generations who might not understand the historical context. Others strongly disagreed. They argued that Fawlty Towers was never promoting racism. Instead, they said the writers were making fun of ignorant people like Major Gowan and Basil Fawlty. In their view, removing the episode ignored the very message the comedy was trying to deliver. Few voices were louder than John Cleese's. In interviews, Cleese criticized the decision, saying that some people had misunderstood how satire works. He explained that comedy often exposes foolish ideas by placing them in the mouths of foolish characters. The audience is expected to laugh at the character, not agree with them. His comments quickly spread across news outlets around the world. Soon, historians, television critics, and comedy writers joined the discussion. Some pointed out that classic films, books, and television shows often reflect the attitudes of the time in which they were made. Rather than removing them completely, they suggested adding context so viewers could better understand the history behind them. Eventually, the episode returned to streaming services with a content warning explaining that it contained outdated language and attitudes. Instead of hiding the program, broadcasters chose to give audiences more information before they watched it. The controversy slowly settled, but it left behind an important question that still has no simple answer. Have you ever looked back at something you loved and realized the world now sees it differently? Many people have. Sometimes history changes, not because the past changes, but because our understanding of it does. Yet even after the episode returned, the story was far from over. The biggest surprise was not that Fawlty Towers survived the controversy. It was why the show has continued to attract new generations of viewers despite it. To understand that, we have to look beyond the headlines and uncover what the creators were really trying to say. But what if the scene that almost changed Fawlty Towers forever had been misunderstood from the very beginning? Comedy has always walked a dangerous line. The best comedians often make people laugh by showing the worst parts of human behavior. The challenge is making sure audiences understand who, or what, is really being mocked. That was the heart of the debate surrounding Fawlty Towers. John Cleese and Connie Booth never wrote Basil Fawlty as someone viewers should admire. Basil was impatient, selfish, proud, and often trapped by his own fears. Almost every episode followed the same pattern. Basil believed he was the smartest person in the room. By the end, his own mistakes had turned a simple problem into complete disaster. The joke was always on him. The same idea applied to Major Gowan. Public interviews with Cleese have consistently explained that the Major's offensive language was meant to reveal an elderly man whose views belonged to another era. His comments were not presented as wise or acceptable. Instead, they highlighted how outdated and embarrassing his attitudes had become. Many television critics agreed with that interpretation. They argued that removing offensive characters from stories could sometimes erase an important lesson. After all, stories often include dishonest people, cruel people, or foolish people, not because they are role models, but because they reflect real human flaws. Still, others remained unconvinced. Some viewers felt that hearing racist language, even in a satirical context, could still be painful. They believed intent was important, but impact mattered too. From that point of view, adding a content warning was a better solution than pretending the issue did not exist. In many ways, both sides were asking the same question from different directions. Can a work of art belong to its time while still being shown to new audiences today? There may never be one answer that satisfies everyone. What is clear is that the controversy introduced Fawlty Towers to people who had never seen it before. Many younger viewers watched the episode for themselves instead of relying on headlines. Some agreed with the criticism. Others came away believing the debate had overlooked the show's use of satire. If stories like this make you see famous films and TV shows in a new way, consider subscribing. Behind many beloved classics are creative decisions, public battles, and hidden truths that are just as fascinating as the stories on screen. Ironically, the scene that nearly damaged the show's reputation also reminded the world why Fawlty Towers still matters. Great comedy does more than make people laugh. It starts conversations that can last for generations. But the show's greatest achievement was still ahead. Somehow, despite producing only 12 episodes, Fawlty Towers became one of the most respected sitcoms in television history, proving that its legacy would outlive every controversy. But the most surprising part of this story is that the controversy never became the show's final chapter. Instead, it became another reason people kept talking about it. Most television series measure success by the number of seasons they produce. Fawlty Towers did the exact opposite. It ended after only 2 seasons and 12 episodes, yet it earned a place among the greatest sitcoms ever made. That alone is remarkable. Many shows release hundreds of episodes before fading from public memory. Fawlty Towers created just 12 carefully written stories, and decades later, people still quote its funniest lines, study its brilliant timing, and debate its boldest moments. Part of that lasting appeal comes from its attention to detail. John Cleese and Connie Booth refused to rush new episodes. They spent months shaping every script, making sure each misunderstanding, every joke, and every disaster built toward an unforgettable ending. Their focus was quality, not quantity. That decision helped make each episode feel timeless. Over the years, the series collected major honors and regularly appeared near the top of lists ranking Britain's greatest television comedies. Critics praised its sharp writing, unforgettable characters, and near-perfect comic pacing. New generations discovered it through reruns, DVDs, and streaming services, proving that great storytelling can outlast changing technology. The controversy of 2020 did not erase that reputation. If anything, it encouraged many people to revisit the series with fresh eyes. Some watched to understand why it had caused such debate. Others simply wanted to see whether one of television's most celebrated comedies still lived up to its legendary status. For many viewers, it did. That does not mean everyone agreed with every scene. But the discussions themselves showed something important. More than 40 years after its original broadcast, Fawlty Towers was still powerful enough to make people laugh, think, argue, and question how comedy should be understood. Everyone has experienced a moment when something from the past looked different through today's eyes. Sometimes those moments challenge us. Sometimes they teach us. And sometimes they remind us that history is rarely as simple as it first appears. The legacy of Fawlty Towers is not built only on its jokes. It is built on fearless writing, unforgettable performances, and a willingness to take creative risks. Some of those risks were celebrated. Others sparked controversy. Together, they ensured that the series would never be forgotten. In the end, the scene that almost pushed the show out of the spotlight became part of a much larger story. One about art, satire, changing values, and the difficult balance between preserving history and respecting modern audiences. But this is only one extraordinary story from the world of television. Another famous production hides an even more unbelievable truth, and you can discover it in the next documentary.